You have a lot, and I mean a lot of choices that you can go after in land investing. So, why would I choose subdividing land over any of the other major categories? I'll explain. And first, let me say, I do a lot of the other categories. There are messy title stuff that come my way. There are tax auctions that I've participated in and gotten properties from. We still do flips, although not as near as much volume as we used to in the land space. But I've come to really like the subdivide space. But it has some pros and cons, and I want to break that down for you because not everything is sunshine and rainbows all the time for everything. And when people paint things that way, I'm a little skeptical. And so I want to be really honest and transparent and have a conversation today about how much I love the subdivide side, but I'm going to be real with you and also share some of the downside that comes with it. All right, let me start off this way in saying that having done just about everything that there is to do in the space besides going fully vertical and developing, A to Z from ground to actual constructed building and then going that route because the development timeline has just kept me out of most of the vertical development side. I really love the subdivide side. And even within that little niche, there's probably some subsections that are worth mentioning. Now, there are states that have exemptions, statewide exemptions. And this is what I would call maybe like the low hanging fruit. In other words, there are laws that as long as you're outside city limits, statewide, you can follow the plans or their rules, and they're not going to push back on you. Meaning, I might be able to take a tract and cut a certain amount of parcels. Now, depending on where you're at, some of these do it by acre size. Some of it do it by number of parcels or number of cuts available. So it really just depends. So like even within the statewide exemption, there are some states that say, hey, you can cut something up 3 times, 4 times, 10 times. There's states like Texas where it says, hey, you can cut unlimited times as long as you have the right road frontage and it's over a certain acre size. So that's kind of the low hanging fruit. But then beyond that, there's even a level where it makes sense to go ahead and do the platting. It makes sense to subdivide into maybe smaller parcels that require more planning and following a little bit more rules in a process. For a lot of what we do, that might be a commissioner court hearing and me following all of the county specs and regulations, especially if we're building a road or running power or if you need water or if you're drilling a well or that sort of thing. So all of those things exist. And then there's maybe even a third tier where I would say, hey, it's more of a full-blown process. There's public hearings added in. It's not just a court hearing. It's way more involved. Maybe they require engineering studies, wetland studies, or just more involved development as far as subdividing land. Now, there's going to be a subsection of people who hear this and they go, subdividing land, these guys are the absolute worst. They're destroying the land and they're doing all these things. And I get all of that. Let me say that I am not D.R. Horton or some other national builder. The subdivisions that I do, I want to bring a product to the community that they actually want. In fact, I was thanked recently, which is like unheard of in this space. I don't say that to brag so much as I've figured out as I failed along the way that there's a better way to do this, where I got thanked at a commissioner hearing because I brought a product that the community actually wanted, that they wanted to get behind, and that people were already interested in that were there in the crowd for the public hearing. So that was really cool. That feels a lot better than doing some kind of subdivision. I'll tell you, this happens in Texas all the time. If you go to do a more high density residential subdivision, for example, there's a whole lot of people that will show up who hate change and are going to shout you down. Despite them complaining about housing prices and they need more housing, they will shut down every development that they can from here till kingdom come because they don't want change. So there's, people talking out of both sides of their mouth, but I enjoy creating a little bit larger parcels because I think the American dream has changed in a lot of ways. And I think your business should probably reflect that. At least I'm trying to reflect that in mine. And what I mean by that is it used to be everybody wanted to be in suburbia. And I'm kind of pointing out my window because it's what I live in now. It's, you can see your neighbor, you're right next door. Maybe you got the white picket fence and the dog, and you're in suburbia, you're right outside the major city, maybe even inside the city limits, so you can have all the utilities and all that sort of thing. But people have come to not like that as much anymore. I think for a number of reasons. One, people really hate HOAs. Despite some of them being decent, a lot of them overcharge and underdeliver for what they are. All these rules and restrictions for common sense things that probably shouldn't be there. You have the proximity problem of just everyone, it just feels like you're crammed into a neighborhood a lot of times. And then you have the traffic and congestion and all the things that come with it. And as we've moved as a workforce as well to more hybrid or virtual working or working from home, the need to be this close to the city has changed for a lot of people. Now, I know a lot of offices are moving to like bring people back and you commute and you go to the office and that sort of thing. But there's still a large subsection of people where that's not the case. And so I think the American dream has moved from that, from suburbia, to more being on the edge of town, being on a little bit more dirt, being a little bit more room, a little bit more elbow room, a place where you can have chickens if you want and maybe have like a little garden or farm and be a little bit more self reliant. And you could be outside of the traffic, but still be close enough to get to the restaurants and the entertainment and that sort of thing. So we've seen this big movement from people that are on, 5,000 square foot lots to wanting a quarter or a half acre, 2 acres, 5 acres, 10. A lot of our subdivisions are the 2, 5, 10 type acre tracts. And people love it. They want to fence it off. They want to have some horse, maybe a couple head of cattle, sheep, goats, chickens, ducks, quail, whatever floats your boat. But they want the ability to do that. And not only do they want that, they want the ability to put a home on it that they can actually afford. So no more of these really shoddy, super high price, but kind of entry, I'm going to call them like builder grade, like entry level homes that are kind of falling apart within a year of you moving in because the quality isn't very good. They can go get what they can actually afford on a piece of land that they can actually afford and have a little piece of the country, a little piece of land to call their own. I think that's where things have shifted. And if you are not experiencing that now and you're not seeing that trend, I think you will. I think no matter what city you're in, whether you're in Atlanta or you're in Dallas or Austin or Denver, wherever, people want to be a little further outside of town, but close proximity to get to all the things they want. There's still things that are important, a good school district or a good private school nearby that they can get to as well. So as we've seen that shift, it's put even more emphasis on the subdivide side of things for me because I can provide that. And the beauty of the subdivide world is that I don't need to buy at as steep of a discount. In fact, in some cases, I don't have to buy at any discount because land in a lot of ways is like Costco. The more you buy in bulk, the cheaper the thing is per unit. So in other words, I can buy 100 acres and the dollar per acre for that is going to be much, much lower, like 3, 5, maybe even 10x lower than what a 2 or a 5 acre tract might sell for. Especially in growing areas, we're starting to see that spread might shrink a little, but that spread is still there. And it's naturally there because the person who can afford to buy 100 acres is just a much smaller buyer pool than the guy that can afford to buy 20 acres. So as we've transitioned our business, as we've started doing more and more of these subdivides and creating the product that people want, it's built a business that I really enjoy. I enjoy solving that problem. I enjoy bringing that product to the market, and I enjoy it being received a lot easier than the suburban high density residential. And look, there's still way more money to be had in that high density space, if I'm being honest, because your ability to go take something and put 100 lots on it, that you're just going to bring a larger buyer pool for builders who can get a higher lot yield and a higher yield per lot because they can kind of cram houses in there. But I almost feel a obligation to stay away from that, to create a more beautiful product that people will actually want. And look, there's going to still be room for that high density. People are going to want that. They do, there's a certain group of people out there that will always want really close proximity and neighbors. And, I've experienced all of this because I've lived on land in the past and then I live in a developed neighborhood now. And I get there's a sense of community with your neighbors, with the right HOA, low fee actually providing something like we have a fishing pond here where it's stocked with fish and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's enjoyable. But I think most people are wanting a little bit more elbow room. And I think I'm seeing the trend going the other way. I see that side growing a lot more than the planned, really cram them in there type subdivisions. So I enjoy it more. And then the ability to go get those deals is a little bit easier. Now, I will say that with one caveat. What's easier is finding it. What's not is necessarily how many of those you can run at a time. So let me talk about to the downside of subdivisions for just a moment. It's going to be capital heavy. So people don't think about this. If you move your entire business to just subdivides, number one, what you're acquiring just requires more volume of dollars because you're acquiring more volume of land. And the dollar per acre is much less than the product you're creating. So that might mean you need to be able to go get 2, 3, 500,000 to go acquire one of these parcels and then start this process. Not everyone has access to that. I will say this has gotten a lot better in this space. There are websites today that you can go to and find funding partners. And again, pricing can be probably more than you want to pay on some of this. I've seen as low as 20% flat interest only. And then I've seen a lot of more people are kind of on the equity side where they want anywhere from 20 to 50% equity in your deal if they're going to float all the money for it. Or maybe they'll take a little bit less, but they'll require you to front some cash to have some skin in the game. So either way works, but the ability to go get these loans has gotten easier, but it's gotten more expensive. So you're going to face that problem. And then you're going to run out of capital anyway. Even if you were using your own dollars, you're going to run out of capital. So you're going to need to make some lending connections, whether you create your own through partnerships or networks or however you do that. As you build a reputation for yourself and as you do more of these projects, I will say it gets a little bit easier because if you have an established track record and you can point back to several projects and be like, hey, here's the last 5 that I did. Here's where I took 100 acres and I created 5-acre tracts and it returned 300-400%. Here was the timeline that it took to do that. So you can take that to a lender and they're going to be much more willing to land at a flat rate, for example, on that. Than a guy who's like, hey, it's my first time. I'm buying 500 acres and I'm going to divvy this thing up. Well, yeah, you don't know what you're doing yet. You don't know what you don't know. And there's a lot of risks there. So just be prepared for that. And then some of the other downsides that people don't talk about in the subdivide space is the timeline. It takes a while to sell through a parcel. This is part of the reason why the research side matters so much. If you don't know what the absorption rate is and you are coming into a rural market and let's say that market on average, you sell through 5-acre parcels. Let's say there's 10 of those that sell a year and now you're adding 30 to the mix. Yeah, you've just saturated that market. Now, maybe those things are flying and maybe there's a demand for it, but looking at things like absorption rate matter here because if you're going to flood a market, just expect to be holding those parcels for a lot longer. One of the downsides I've seen that people don't anticipate is how long it's going to take to sell through. And so you might have somebody that goes, oh, great, 5-acre parcels sell for 10,000 an acre and I bought, 100 acres at 2,000 an acre. Well, it's a great spread. But it's probably going to take you 2 or 3 years at that kind of a spread. And if you're too rural to sell through all of that and actually get paid out. And you're going to have added costs. This is the other thing that people don't consider is the added cost to improve a lot of this land. Now, you can cherry pick deals and do your very best to reduce the amount of infrastructure that needs to go in because there's existing. But if you're going to do things like tree clearing and putting in culverts and driveways and extending power and that sort of thing, it can add up pretty quick. And so if you're just looking at the spread in dollar per acre for land and not underwriting it fully, that can get in the way of things as well. One of the other things that we're seeing people not really thinking too hard about is that cost of that capital over time. And now it used to be, again, when interest rates were really low, the money was easier to get. You can go to a bank and you can go, maybe you could get better terms than you can get today. But either way, you're going to have to pay interest to somebody, whether it's the bank or a private money lender or whoever you're partnering with. And that cost adds up over time. And so going back to the absorption thing, if you are trying to sell through to get the debt out in a certain period, let's say that you want to get all the debt out in a year to make yourself whole, and then all the rest would be profit going forward, really, really have to pay attention to that because markets can change even from when you marketed or got that property. In fact, this has happened to me. I've been in parts of Texas where things were flying. I got the property, we subdivided it, put it on the market, and all of a sudden things just hit a standstill, right? Just because the market was strong when you entered it doesn't mean it'll stay that way. And so if you haven't planned carefully enough, it can eat you alive. I saw a lot of people wash out of this business or start to lose money on deals because they started to reduce the margin on deals. Because when the market's hot, they're like, oh, I can just subdivide this thing up and sell through my parcels and I'll be out in like 6 months. And so they raise enough for maybe 6, 7 months of interest payments, and now market slows, they're in it for a year and a half, and they're having to do capital calls to partners or come up with the capital out of pocket to float this while they're waiting for it to sell. It's not a position you want to be in. Be hyper conservative with your underwriting always. Assume you're going to be in it for a year or two. Have that capital available and set aside in order to do that. Now, a lot of this can be worked out with your lender. Maybe they're willing to wait upon sale to take those interest payments, which takes the stress off of you. But either way, they're going to get paid back first. So try to plan ahead, be conservative in your underwriting, and understand that that length of time is one of your biggest risk factors that people don't account for. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I know that sounds like I've just wailed here on the cons here for a little bit, but the upside potential of this is really strong. And I will get into one of my favorite upsides, but I guess let me give the downside first. One other downside is with that time it takes to get through these, this can be a very lumpy business. In the way of if I've got to pay back my lender, let's say $200,000 in sales before I get paid, and that takes 9 months, let's say. That's 9 months of me going without any kind of payment to myself and into my business. If you're not careful, that can be extremely damaging. Now, things like infinite banking help level that out by storing capital over time so that it grows no matter what. So that even if it takes me 9 months, my money continued to grow in one place and I got that return no matter what happened with the deal. But either way, it's going to take some time to get through all that and get paid back. So you're going to have that lumpiness. So how do you get consistency in the subdivide space is actually by doing more projects, because you need to have some that are hitting today, some that will hit in 3, 6, 9 months, some that will hit in a year. And so you're going to build up that inventory as a way to stabilize that return over time, because you're going to have some that are going to sell in owner finance, some that are going to sell for cash. But you're going to find yourself probably for the first 1, maybe even 2 years, the income's going to be, with a few exceptions. If you're taking a 20-acre tract and just creating 4 parcels and then selling those, you can probably get through that pretty quick. But as you get into the bigger projects that take more time to even hit the market, right? Like it may take you 60, 90, maybe even 120 days to get through the process in order to get these parcels on the market. Well, yeah, things start to get real lumpy. And so you need a few projects going so that you have some where the debt is paid back now and you're starting to get income from that. And then you'll get some mix of owner finance probably in order to sell through a larger quantity of deals faster. So you'll have this basis coming in every month, and then you'll start getting these big hits, maybe 1 or 2 lots a month, where you're getting a larger chunk coming in. And then you'll be paying debt on this project, and that one will be paying you. And then you'll have this monthly coming in to cover all your overhead. So to me, the best way to build consistency in the subdivide space is just have a few projects running at a time minimum. And if that starts to die out, you're going to end up hitting this tail where you're not going to get paid for some portion. Now, you'll always have, I say always, hopefully you'll always have the monthly income coming in from the notes, but that's assuming there's not defaults, right? And if they default, you might have to go foreclose depending on how you set that up. That's usually how we do it, so that there's a true mortgage on the property. And you have to wait for that to go through the legal process in order to get that property back and then to resell it. So just be aware that there's lumpiness. The way you solve that is consistently bringing in a few projects a year to get out of the debt, to get stuff hitting at different times and building up that inventory. And then you're going to have this really slow period, but then you're going to have this build up time. And it's going to feel really good because you're going to have 1, 2, maybe, 3 lots a month closing. Some portion of that will be cash. And so all of a sudden you'll go from feeling the pinch over the first year and not making a whole lot probably to, a couple lots selling, and maybe those lots are netting you $15, $20, $40, $50,000 a lot. That feels really good. And that feels safe for a time until you sell through, and then you run into the time issue again. So in my mind, again, build consistent income by building inventory, which means trying to take on maybe 1 to 2 projects a quarter, as long as it's not too overwhelming for you. So that's how you build that in that space. That's how you solve that problem. But it's one of the more enjoyable sides of land investing that I've participated in. It doesn't feel good, at least to me, to just, most people's only tool in their toolbox is just lowballing the bejesus out of everybody and hopefully getting a deal back. Look, that helps some people, and I want a discount on everything. But if you can shift your mindset from what's the lowest I can get this at to what's the most I can pay and it still worked for me, there's something about that mind shift change that I think unlocks the door, unlocks the conversation, and builds trust way faster and way easier. There's just a different that tension disappears because now my conversation isn't trying to get this thing and nickel and dime somebody down to the lowest possible value. It's what's the most I can pay and this still works for me. And I can have more, I think it's not that people are dishonest, but I think you can have a more honest conversation with people when you can say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here are actual comps in the market. And you can bring that to people and be like, hey, this guy sold this property down the road, 200 acres, sold it 4,500 an acre, based on an average closing rate. Here's what he walked away with. If I paid you that, would that work for you? The ability to do that versus going, oh man, yeah, comps are all over the place. Yeah, I did see that one that you just mentioned that sold down the road at that. I can only pay half of that. That's just a much harder conversation to have. It's much harder to win deals that way. And it honestly just doesn't feel good. I prefer the method of, hey, this is what the comps are. Here's what we can pay. We're pretty darn competitive. We're pretty darn close. Again, if you can solve the dollar issue problem of coming up with the money for this sort of thing, then that opens the doors to those types of deals. Now, if all of this has been overwhelming and you just want to get started and you want to try to get your first Subdivide deal, this is a lot of what we talk about inside the Land Investor Coalition community. There's no course, there's no $10,000 coaching thing. It is literally a $100 a month community where I supply tools that I build for my business personally inside of there at no additional cost. So once you're inside the community, you get access to all the stuff and you get access to me. And maybe that's useful for you. Maybe it's not. Maybe you're like, this guy never shuts up. I never want to hear him talk again. But I know the Subdivide space. So I've done pretty well in it. And I've helped people inside the community get their first Subdivides done. And you're not going to need someone like me for forever, but it certainly helps to have a little bit of experience looking over your shoulder at a deal to try to help you verify what's going on and that the deal makes sense and bring up some issues that I've faced and failed out in the past. And maybe you're just not even aware of because you don't know what you don't know. And you've never done one of these deals and where you get the funding for it, how long it takes. And maybe you're working in an area that I work and I can recommend somebody to put in the driveways for you or a broker relationship or that sort of thing. So I go live pretty much every day looking at on-market deals and helping in the community and going through my normal workflow that you can follow along with. You can listen to other people cold call and get feedback. And then the tools that I have in there today, I think are pretty phenomenal. I've come up with my own proprietary grading system that tells you, hey, these areas are ideal for subdivides. You can go in there and you can look at them and it gives a breakdown of what the rules and regulations are, what the best spread is as far as large tract versus small tract that you can effectively do pretty simply following their process for subdividing there. And then I've created a tool in there that you can go to if you pull a KML or a comp report from either Priced, PRYCD, or from Land Portal, you can import that. It'll jump over to it on a map, let you do some due diligence. It'll auto cut it up to show you the highest return possibility. All that stuff is all inside the community. I think it's pretty unique. I've never seen anything to that level of detail out there. And again, it's provided at no additional cost. Once you're a member, and you get to use it. So if that sounds good, something you want to participate in, man, I'd love to have you in there. I love talking about this stuff. In fact, I'm going to have to shut this video off. Otherwise, I would keep talking and then nobody would watch this because it'd be like 3 hours long. But come join us in the community. Come have these conversations. Come make these connections. Come work alongside us and utilize these tools. I hope to see you in there. If you want to join, I will leave a link down below, but you can go to jasoncasco.com and just click on community and join there. It is inside the Discord platform is where I host that so that we can video stream live and you can follow along, or I can follow along your live stream inside of there to give you feedback and provide some possible advice and what I see. So if that sounds good to you, hope to see you in there. Hope it makes the same impact for you as it has for the current members.